So, Suzanne, we were talking about um, admiration and how admiration has sort of gone down among the young, especially. And we were also discussing our experience with teaching students and the difficulty in introducing them to texts and thinkers um, in a way that I mean, what we find lacking is the spark for
Right.
um, some of this, and we discussed how this might be more systemic than an individual thing. That
Right.
there is a whole systematic, concerted even. I would go as far as that to to
Strip
strip.
the individual,
Yeah.
strip the individual of their capacity, not only for sustained attention, reflection, critical thinking, but take away their ability to be awed, to be moved, right? That everything is like meh, meh, that
Yeah.
word a
Yeah.
lot. I see, and
Yes.
it's like you brought up, teaching the students. You couldn't even get them to read the Apology by Plato, and so you talk it through them with them rather as a story, and yet so few of them had any response. Like a lack of engagement. An inability to recognize the greatness. That's what I was thinking when you were talking. Was I was thinking about
Greatness.
Nietzsche and how noble morality is one of its hallmarks is this capacity to have admiration and appreciation for greatness and to recognize nobility,
Yes.
right? And so it doesn't even matter whether it's the story of Socrates conviction and death, or something about animals in the wild, or anything at all, poetry, literature. um,
There
there's
is
something has happened.
right. There is also like an intellectual, very comfortable intellectual challenge to this greatness idea that
Right.
that this admiration for greatness is a form of elitism, and in fact, when there is no admiration for greatness, there is more egalitarianism. But our societies are not egalitarian anymore than
Right.
on the contrary, they're becoming much more non-egalitarian and hierarchical, and so that doesn't quite compute. That
Right.
that because we don't find um, that connection to greatness, therefore we are becoming less elitist. No, our societies are becoming more elitist.
Right.
The wealth gap is widening. So, that sort of intellectual response doesn't quite work. So, yeah. And speaking of awe, there's this wonderful Jewish philosopher, and religious scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel, who who thinks that awe is the sort of the fundamental comportment to being
Mm-hmm.
that we need to
Mm-hmm.
develop, and to him, in a way, awe uh, is what distinguishes us
Mm-hmm.
in our humanity, and it is actually the lack of awe which has led us to where we are today. So
Right.
yeah, awe, and to be awe-inspired is
Mm-hmm.
um, is what maybe is going away. And
Right.
I
Well, in
was
that way, there's a couple of things tied to that, I think. So first would be, like you pointed out, there's this confusion about, what egalitarianism would look like, right? And it's somehow this horrible misunderstanding that no one then is a genius, or no one is a standout, exceptional, whatever, right? Which is, I mean, on the face of it, I guess I could see how people unreflectively would embrace that. But it seems to me that anybody that immediately gives real thought to it would, and again, to me, this is just like good basic reasoning, would see that that is very flawed. Because do you really want a mediocre surgeon doing your brain surgery?
Right.
Do you want to listen to mediocre violinists at the orchestra? No, you don't. Okay, none of us really want mediocrity, right? Um, unless we've already been altered in such a way that we don't even have the capacity to recognize greatness, which I'm still holding as something that might be happening, to put that to the one side. But the other issue would have to do with the way in which um, there, whether it's explicit or not, that there is some kind of systematic thing occurring such that there's the possibility that people don't even can't even recognize greatness, but then there's this other thing where they're demonizing it, or actively railing against it, or and again, Nietzsche, that's the ignobility, right? It's the ignoble that's fueled by envy and resentment. They can't stand to see a great person because it acts as a mirror, and in that mirror, all they see is their own inferiority. And so again, I'm thinking Nietzsche, Sartre here, Sartre on his ideology of hate, because both of those go hand in hand. Because that kind of person wants mediocrity. They don't want to stand out. They don't want anyone else to stand out. They need everybody and everything to be exactly the same, right? So that they're not put on the spot, and that makes
Yeah.
them comfortable, right?
Right.
Um, and I don't know, it's a little mind blowing. It's a little crazy. And, I will say that, uh, because I told you before about this, a study, and I need to, get the man's name, but he presented in front of congressional hearing and about outcomes in education since they began measuring it, 1930s, I think. Every time it goes higher and higher until now, where it has dropped.
Mm.
And so, the lack of critical thinking skills, no attention span, no willingness, as you were talking about, to read philosophy, or as your colleague noted, they don't want to read literature. They don't even want to watch a film. Okay. Um, and so it's like, okay, it's clearly, I think it's pretty clear and evident that Heidegger's critique of technology is incredibly relevant here, and what tech companies and devices have succeeded at doing is causing this to some degree to unfold. Okay, so that we have these young people, again, not all by any means. I have a handful every time that are
Yes.
engaged, and but they're the exception, not the rule. And I feel like, take me back 15 years ago to teach, and it was more, the rule was most people were engaged, right? Um, Depending obviously on the presentation, and if the instructor was good and powerful and stuff. So yeah, so I don't know
Th- There's also,
what.
I think, it's also important to demystify one thing, I think, in this conversation, or conversations about these issues, which is that there's often this idea that greatness is elitist, and
Right,
somehow mediocrity is seen as of the people. But that is actually not necessarily true, in
right,
that it, mediocrity can and often is conformist. It is conforming to the paradigm which the powers that be are imposing. And in
right,
fact, greatness is not greatness in the sense that the state is recognizing something as great, um, or a group or a party is recognizing as something. Actually, greatness is the marginal. And
mhm,
there's often in discourse, in philosophy and in political thought, there is a fear of that word because it often conjures up certain associations which it need not, because actually, in a society like ours, we are more likely to find greatness at the margins and at the marginalized in our society rather than at the centers
Right.
of power, or in the sort of in the groups that are being controlled by those powers. So when we are talking about greatness and when we are talking about awe-inspiring, we are more likely going to find that at the margins of our current systems.
Right.
So
Yeah. And more, even in, I'm thinking as you were talking, in education.
yes.
Okay. And what immediately came to mind was what I think is one of the dumbest proposals ever,
Hmm.
which is the notion that something like AI could ever replace a good instructor. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. And as someone that had so many wonderful, and I mean, was it luck? Was it fate? I don't know. But I am not being untruthful when I tell you that through a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD, I only ever had three instructors that I did not consider to be excellent. And the ones I did have that were so excellent, I would try to take other classes with that person because their power as a teacher, right? And you felt, I mean, I was excited. I think in all my schooling years, I might have only ever missed class twice because I
And,
loved to go.
and,
And
and I'm sure the reason for that is not only the intellectual element, but also the passion, the
right,
admiration. All this also relates to our discussion of admiration, because you can't
right,
admire a, a sort of robotic, uh,
right,
sort of
right,
information regurgitating machine. There's nothing to admire in that.
right,
But
right,
but in a culture which does not want admiration, it makes sense that AI would flourish.
right,
But the your instructors, your teachers, I'm sure what you really were impacted by in them was their honesty and their total their passion for what they were doing, and
right.
the truthfulness of that passion,
Yes.
um,
And I would add their ferocity
their ferocity.
because
Yes,
they were males and females both, and they were fierce intellectual people who, did, as all awe will do, inspire both an admiration and a little element of fear and respect because
yes,
it's not like you're going to challenge them with some idiotic nonsense
yes,
because you at least have the capacity to recognize the depth of their thinking, and respect for their prolonged education. And like you pointed out, it's passion. Like they were so much into what they were doing. And again, these were people from different disciplines, not all philosophy by any means, history, literature, classical culture, foreign language instructors. I mean, and so it was all of those things,
right,
but that's what I think is part of it. Because, real awe is both like beautiful and terrifying.
yes,
That's what it is for something to be awesome in the original sense. um, Go back to this idea of mediocrity. Well, it's because mediocrity is not scary.
yes,
And, if that's what's happening to people, they are becoming such that they can't even embrace and recognize and enjoy, being challenged intellectually. I think we're doomed. Like, seriously, like,
yes. And
what is,
if I were uh, in the government, if I were I were in control of power and wealth and so on, I can clearly see why I wouldn't want those teachers in the classroom,
right?
because
Absolutely.
not only do they inspire, not only do they challenge the students, but they also inspire the need in them or the fire in
Right.
them to challenge in turn. in their
Exactly.
lives. And
Exactly.
I can see why AI would be worth depleting all the water resources that you just informed me before we started recording. I can see why that would be worth that. It would
Right.
make sense to me to invest in this machine and replace the ferocious teacher
Hmm.
with this
Right.
non-awe-inspiring, insipid, boring
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
machine learning technology. I can see the from their point of view. I'm not saying that morally
Right.
it is right, but from their point of view, I can see why it would be beneficial to the powerful. And so
Right.
when we critique mediocrity, we are critiquing power. We are not like
Right.
it's the opposite of elitism in my opinion.
Me too. I agree. It has nothing to do with elitism in that regard. What you do always need to kind of flesh out, I think, because at this point, I mean, it's funny because the elite generally refers to people of extreme wealth. And what you find is there are people who will try to argue that those people are somehow geniuses, which is absurd. Elon Musk is not a genius. He
No.
hired a lot of people of really great intellect. Okay.
Mm.
He himself, I don't believe, has really done anything truly on his own as far as, the thinking and the creating. Um, a business. He's a
I mean,
business minded.
they
Um,
don't even look smart on an everyday level. I mean,
No,
I
no,
would,
I wouldn't see them on the street and think, wow, that's
yes,
a smart guy.
yeah,
Um, no. And so we have to like flesh out the term elite. Um, but yeah, I think that you're right that it serves the interests of power to one way or the other convince the masses that mediocrity is best, mediocrity is not threatening, that's what constitutes egalitarianism and freedom, and that anybody who dares to go against the grain, to push back, to like we've talked about, to challenge borders, to defy limits, to enter even into liminal space, is somehow the threat and to be eliminated. Um, so yeah, I mean that seems pretty straightforward, and I think what we're seeing is more and more, at least in this country of America, um, we're seeing the rise of the mediocrity and the incompetence. We definitely have these truly incompetent people at very high levels right now. I mean, it's mind blowing, truly and utterly mind blowing. While at the same time, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, we're seeing the crumbling of pretty much any and all so-called legitimate institutions and things like the rule of law. I mean,
yes,
what are you talking about? Like, the law has been violated over and over and over again, and the structure that's supposed to, prevent certain kinds of things from happening, it isn't functioning. And
yeah,
it's all like everybody's just kind of either pretending it's not happening, or they're just like this, or they're freaking out. Obviously, there's
right.
people who are legitimately upset and concerned. Um, but yeah, I do think that notion of awe and
Mm.
admiration as always involving at least a modicum of fear.
Yes,
Because to really respect someone, you have to have a little bit of fear of them, or otherwise they're a doormat. I
there,
mean, that's just realistic.
right.
Um,
Um,
so there's something to that. There's something to that. And, I don't know if it's something about in this nation of the United States, if it's something about parenting and technology. I can't, or the K through 12 education system. I don't know, or giving everybody trophies. I don't know. But there's just fewer and fewer people. They're not non-existent, okay, but
mm,
there's fewer and fewer people who, as Nietzsche describes it, really value competition, who really value cultivating self-discipline, who value a challenge, right?
right,
The only kind of challenge they're interested in is like screaming at somebody on their social media, right, and
right,
owning the libs or whatever.
right,
Um, and so it's pretty upsetting.
right. Yeah.
It's pretty yeah, disillusioning.
We also, I mean, you mentioned it, um, and we also were discussing this of the sort of the relevance of Heidegger and his ideas in this context. So I thought of sharing something from him, which actually uh, goes to show the place of admiration in his thinking, though he doesn't call it admiration, but it's this line from the Field Path, which he wrote. So I'll just share my screen. It's really
Mhm.
beautiful the way he. So so this is, I think, written in the in the 40s, and so if you see that, so in the first paragraph, he talks about basically uh, his hometown and a path that runs through his town, and he says, now I'm going to read from the last line of the first paragraph. So he says, talking about this path, onward, past its edge, it greets a tall oak, under which a roughly hewn bench stands. So we can
Mhm.
imagine like a path going round an oak tree, and under the tree there's this bench.
Mhm.
Now he says, and this is the line, he says, occasionally there lay on the bench some writing or other of the great thinkers, which a
Mhm.
young awkwardness attempted to decipher. Now, it's a short line, and it's really nothing in terms of the amount of description and so on that he gives. But I was always struck by this line, um,
Mhm.
that on this bench there lay the writing of the great thinkers. Uh, it could have been a book of Kant's, maybe the Critique, or maybe maybe Descartes, or but the idea is that these are um, great thinkers whose work our awkwardness is attempting to understand it, attempting to decipher. And what I
Mhm.
also find interesting is that he's such a critic of the Western tradition, but he doesn't criticize it in a way that, I mean, he's first awed by it, and he is blown away by the greatness of what is there. And so it's not a kind of awe that is conforming to that tradition. It's an awe which gives rise to genuine confrontation.
Right.
But that genuine confrontation is also coming from a humility.
Mhm.
And there's another place where Heidegger says that if you if you meet with somebody like Leibniz or someone else, or these thinkers that he critiques, and if you just um, ignore Leibniz with the move of your wave of your hand,
Mhm.
you may think that you have done away with Leibniz, but really you are more in control of Leibniz when you do that,
Mhm.
right? It's only
Right.
when you respect him and you encounter
Right.
him properly and you
Right.
allow your awkwardness to engage with him in all honesty, it's only then that you can be in control of the tradition. It's not when you ignore and don't read, push things aside, and think that that the sort of confrontation is already sort of done. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
It's then that the think that tradition actually overpowers you. And it's
Right.
actually a really important idea in Heidegger, going all the way back to being in time, where
Right.
confrontation involves um, a serious, humble,
Right.
odd criticism,
Yes.
you know?
That's the
So
ethical and epistemic humility that we discussed
we
before,
discussed,
I
yes,
think.
yes,
And again, it's a comportment,
yes,
right? And I do like that what you shared a lot. I think that awkwardness is important there because by noting the awkwardness, I think we can recognize that this is not an egoic venture.
yes,
A true encounter with a thinker is not an egoic venture. It's what it even said youthfulness, right? Awkward and
Yes,
youthful
awkward youth.
were two.
Yes, youthful
Um,
awkwardness.
Youthful to me doesn't mean just that you were only 17 years old,
Yeah,
but rather youthful in your comportment, um, not jaded. You don't have an agenda. And
right.
again, I
That's a
think
good.
where he says it's, real thinking's not going to be polemical.
Yes.
It's not going to be just this automatic opposition. In that passage from it's in poetry, language, thought, but it's that passage about um, adversaries versus opponents, right? He
Yes.
wants to make a distinction between those two kinds of positions, right? And the opponent's role is never the thinking role, he says, right? And so, for me, even if it's, not that I hate, there's any philosopher I hate. I'm trying to think of someone I don't like a lot. Oh, Hobbes. Hobbes. I loathe Hobbes' concepts and his egoism and but at the same time, for me to actually put it to work in my own thinking, I did have to kind of have this awkwardness and a youthfulness in my approach so that I could, as I used to say to students, reading any philosopher in a way is like learning a new language because you
That's a
have to bear with them long enough till you get in a groove and feel like you're understanding how their thought processes translate into the written word. And obviously, with translations, it's even more difficult because it's coming from another language. But yeah, that was a really good passage. And I did sneak a look at that next line about something about riddles, and then you need to
yes.
take a walk down the path, which
Yes.
I thought was really good.
Yes.
Right? To me, that's the whole you can't just have one afternoon on Plato in an intro class and think that you have done anything to encounter Plato's thinking,
Yes.
right? Um, you need to wander on the
And
path for quite some time.
now that you point out the next line, I mean, he says something like the path came to the rescue or the path came to
Right.
help. So
Right.
there's also in encountering a thinker, there's also the need to walk in their shoes,
Hmm.
to take their path as well, because it's we have to also understand what they're saying from their,
Right.
I don't want to use the word perspective, but from
It
their,
is, though. It
it
is
is.
kind of, it's the facets, the different
Yes,
facets of being the facetiousness. So there is a way in which, it's a perspective. But that's why I said it can be like learning a foreign
it
language
is it is
because
that is quite a good analogy. It is very
because
much like,
you can't just put, I mean, this is where I've always thought it's funny that people think they can, sure, you can go to a foreign country and
yeah,
use an app and, ask things like, where is my hotel? Where's the bathroom? Right. But you're not going to have some kind of simplistic app and have
yes,
any kind of meaningful, truly meaningful interchange with a foreign person in another language. You're going to have to
yes,
know something about the language and its functioning, right? And so to me, that's I always like that metaphor. And it really honestly came to me during my master's degree, really fully, because I was taking an independent study on Taoism and reading Zhuangzi, the Tao Te Ching, and stuff like that. And I was doing an independent study on Levinas, and
oh,
so it was so interesting because I'm doing all this heavy reading on my own, me with a professor 101. And that's when I realized, wow, it's like a different language. Like I put on my Taoism hat and I had to it took a little bit,
Bec-
but it was much more meaningful after that, right?
because a big it's so well put, especially the language analogy, because I mean, it's not that, okay, let's take someone like Plato. Everybody can rehearse the reason why Plato is wrong. It's not uncommon to find people saying that, or I mean, there are so many books on Plato's essentialism, um, and how the forms and the realm of the ideas and so on do not work, etc., etc. But it's not so simple in that what we need to do when we engage with Plato is to it, it's to is to be hurt by the same thing that he is hurt
Mhm.
by, in some sense,
Right.
in the sense that
Mhm.
the idea, whatever it is that is part of his project, it's it's not, I mean, it's not coming out of this simple right wrong answer to questions, um,
Right.
that later we have figured out that he gave wrong answers and now we can move on. That's not how it works. It's a project which has its own necessity, and
Hmm.
therefore it will always return. And I really think a lot about Whitehead's sort of definition of the history of philosophy as footnotes to Plato. And in a way, it's a footnote to Aristotle as well, and Plotinus as well, because what they are up to is not in some sense up to them even.
Right.
It's there is something of a necessity to what they are doing. And
Hmm.
it is not, which is what that line which you quoted should mean, that you cannot be a thinker, and you cannot inhabit the world that an Aristotle or a Plato are inhabiting by simply being an opponent and
Right.
simply having figured out, checked the right boxes that say that Aristotle is wrong, and therefore now you can move to the next guy. That
Hmm.
that that's simply not how thinking operates, and I
It's
think that
not thinking.
it's
For
yeah,
sure, it's not
yes,
thinking.
yes,
Sophistry, perhaps, some form of sophistry. But
yeah,
you know what else came to mind as you were talking just then, which was really good. Two things. One was, this sort of sincere, awkward, youthful, open engagement with any thinker, um, with an attempt to, like you said, put ourselves in their shoes, um, learn the language that they're using, right, or what have you. It made me think of the unthought and the importance of the unthought in any given thinker, right? Heidegger tells us the greatest gift from any great thinker is the unthought in their own thinking. And that can definitely be understood in sort of a few different ways. We could talk about all the ways. There's probably more ways that we can come up with. But to me, one of the ways it definitely involves this, like you were just saying, their project or what prompted them, or you used the word, I think, pain initially. You said
yes,
something about their pain. And it's like these people aren't, the great thinkers are not just pulling some random idea out of a hat and then devoting their life to it. It's they are called, as Heidegger would say, that they have a calling, that's beyond their own will, right? It's from being itself to prompt them to pursue something, and that likely does involve one kind of pain or another. And when we try to read, like, Plato, and think about Socrates, right? Because Plato, with all of his discussions of Socrates, um, we're trying to contextualize it, imagine it. That's our imaginal functioning. Even be there. I mean, that for me, I've always been that
yes,
way as a reader. I see it. That's why I loved reading as a child. I could tell you exactly what places look like, and that they were creations in my mind based off the words that I was reading. And I think that's what it is about, is like inhabiting the world that, and again, very Heidegger, and trying to at least come to inhabit as best we can the world in which they are undertaking
yes,
their projects. Um, but yeah, there was
mhm,
something else I was going to bring up too, but it flew out, so it might come back. But that
yeah.
was really good. I think pain is a good word, and obviously writ large, it can involve a lot of things. Um,
And
but
also,
yeah,
I think, and this might be something trivial, but I think it isn't. The big thing, I think, that we might be at the risk of losing is rereading. So,
yeah,
not only are we supposed to read, but which itself is endangered now, but the whole project of constantly returning to these texts and rereading them and
right.
coming to them from multiple paths, now that the path has become the metaphor because of that text from Heidegger. So the staying with the thinker rather than
Hmm.
right. And so and again, staying with the thinker, tarrying with the thinker might not, and it's nice that it's the bench which is the metaphor there. So you have to
Right.
sit. So it's a bench on a path. So you sit, you give time, and you don't rush. And I think the opponent is always in a rush, obviously, because
Yes.
they want
Hmm.
to win something. And
Yes.
so the whole idea is to reread or to listen to
Hmm.
what is being said. And it's there that the unthought will slowly
Yes.
emerge, I think. Um,
Oh, yes.
the constant returning to, I don't know, constant returning to the Phaedo or to the symposium or to
Hmm.
even the texts from Plotinus and so on. So it's this that needs to also be uh, taught and preserved the art not
Right.
only of reading but rereading because it looks as if so when he says that the bench has a book or a text or other of the writings or other of the great thinkers, so it looks as if he has kept it on that bench from a
Mhm.
previous walk, right? I
Right.
mean, why would it be lying there just like that on a bench? It's because he kept it there in the previous walk, and he's coming back to it in this walk. So, I mean, one can read that in a metaphorical sense that, the whole point that he's expressing there is this need to return to the text, to come
Right.
back again and again and find it lying there and come back awkwardly to Plato,
Right.
to so
Right.
this is another skill, or this is another thing that only awe and that youth
Yes.
and that youthful
Yes.
fear
Exactly.
will bring. It will not come if we think of the symposium as just any other text, which we can read once and decide whether it makes sense or not, whether it's worth
Right.
our time or not, and move on. It's not going to open. The unthought is not going to open that way. So, uh,
Right.
yeah,
No, but I like that you said that uh, again because you're talking, I'm listening, but I also images get created in my mind based on what you're saying, and so in part something you said and his very words. So even whether we're talking about Heidegger or you and I or someone else, you could be 80 years old and you can return to that bench and
yes,
you can be, it's a comportment, you can cultivate it, you can adopt it, you can be youthful and awkward. And I think of, oh, it's some great poet line and I'm just not thinking of it, but it's something, it's about lovers and it's about lovers also as a metaphor, but the sort of that nervousness and
yes,
excitedness, right, and the newness of young love, right? And I
yes,
think of that with philosophy and how we approach it, how we feel about it, and what we do with it. And now I'm even liking more his description, and I want to go back to it later when we're all done. But because okay, they said something about a big oak tree, right? And so I'm thinking about the oak tree itself as a metaphor, right? And oaks and how large they become and how old they can be, and the notions of the tree of knowledge. And yet at the base of this tree is always a place provided for one to tarry, for one to linger, for one to return to again and again, right?
in the
Because
shade.
there's also a path, right? Yeah, the shade to you can rest there. And then there's the path so that you can process and reflect and maybe bandy about ideas and then yet return again, right, and again and again and again throughout your entire existence, right. Which again I took him to mean just any and all great thinkers that
Right.
text represent, and as we come back to them, and that's my own experience, and I think you and I have discussed it before, especially because I teach certain classes again and again, my God, for 25 years now, and there's just certain texts I like to teach students, And so, it's not like I read, let's just take Allegory of the Cave, Republic, uh, read it two times or so. I reread it every semester. And
Right.
it really is true that, or reread Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics or whatever, and I will see new things there, or something will shift in the way I understand that line. And, I don't know if that's exactly what it is to think the unthought. It's certainly me thinking my own unthought about that text,
Yes.
something new. And it's also the infinitude of being, right? It's aletheia, the unconcealment that always has concealment at its heart. So, on my 17th reading, right, there was something new unconcealed that hadn't been there 16 times previously. So yeah, I think all those things are relevant. And you have to have a certain kind of comportment or whatever you want to call it, that you want to be odd, you want to feel that admiration, you want to. I do that a lot. I read pages of Heidegger, and I know it may not be this page, but very soon there's something that's just going to be like, wow, even though I've read that essay already, right, multiple times. And I'll see a line as if it's brand new and it's wonderful
Right.
and amazing, right? And I do fear that whatever that is occurring less
Hmm.
often
So then
for
the
people.
so then awe and the ability for awe may be the main casualty rather than even intelligence or attention. It might be this principle, whatever this is, because I also think to Heidegger's consternation, maybe, but I also find this to be very humanistic. And I say consternation because of Heidegger's critique of humanism, or at least a particular type of humanism. But I
Right.
also think that there's something deeply human about whatever we discussed, in that this is,
Maybe that's the deeply Dasein. Maybe,
yes,
that would be the better way to put it.
yes,
It's, you know,
yeah, yeah, that the deep Dasein of all all of us Daseins,
mhm.
is this capacity for that the return in youthful awkward awe to the Nicomachean Ethics, or to the allegory of the cave and so on. Because what are we talking when we are saying this? We are talking about creativity. We are talking
Mhm.
about deep nourishment for the soul and for the mind.
Mhm.
We are talking about
Mhm.
analytical and critical skills, the ability to share this with others. And so our social existence,
Empathy,
yeah,
right? Empathy, sympathy,
empathy.
compassion,
Yes,
our
yes,
very capacity for imagination. I
yes,
have
yes.
for decades, I mean, I've been teaching 26 years, and at least for the last 10, 15, I've been a little bit concerned about how the decline in reading
Yes,
does indeed, it's tied to, I'm not a neuroscientist or what have you, but there's something there about a loss of imagination as
yes,
well,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Um,
And so if these elements constitute our humanity, then um looking for the unthought is the most deeply human thing that
mhm,
that we could be doing.
right.
And also, now that we if we were to go further with the bench metaphor, that also looks like like a roadside public library at this point, because others who are walking on the same path can also sit on that bench and take a
Right,
look at those books, and maybe at
right.
the notes that are,
In the
written,
margin. Yeah,
yes, on the margin, written by these multiple
right,
readers. And so there's also that social component to this, because the reading is not taking place inside a house or in the library, but outside, under the great oak, on the side of this path, which is obviously a public thing. A path is
right,
taken by people. So yeah, so all this might be our deep Dasein, our deep
right.
humanity, which is being expressed here. Which also makes
Yeah.
me think, have you noticed that when we have these reels on Instagram and so on, they are not findable. So if you have a reel and if you
Hmm.
don't like it or if you don't share it, it's
Hmm.
absolutely
Right.
impossible to find it again. And
Right.
to everyone watching, you can do this as as a social experiment. So go to any, I mean, either on Facebook or on Instagram. Um, if you like a reel, uh, don't like it because then you can actually find it in your settings.
Right.
Don't like it and don't share it, but just watch it and then scroll ahead or switch the app off and turn it on and you find me that reel. It's not findable. It's
Right.
that one time. I mean,
Fleeting.
yes, that
Right.
fleeting. And it's not as if the reel has been deleted. You can find it if you actually make the effort, but it'll take you a really long time. But the main point is the structure of that media or that
Right.
medium is not meant for returning. It's not meant
Exactly.
for coming back. You watch it once, you move to the next one, you move to the next one. So it's
Disposable. It's
disposable.
disposable.
Yes.
Right? A one use. It's a
One
one
use.
use product, like a one
Yes.
use plastic, which is horrifying. But
Right.
right, it's the same idea though, and I'm glad you brought it up. I hadn't thought of it in that way. But that's right, because I noticed that early on. I'm pretty new to Instagram, as you know.
Yeah.
And I would see something that, I liked and might want to share with someone later and never could find it. So I realized, oh, if you like it, you better send it to somebody, or
Yes.
there's a way to like save things in some
Right.
little tab or something.
Right.
But that's a great example, but I think it's more than an example as well. I think it's part and parcel of the phenomenon we're talking about
Yes.
that is Heidegger's critique of technology and what its impacts are on human beings. Because
Yeah.
that tarrying, that lingering on the bench, as we're talking about it, especially noting that it's at the base of a oak tree, I think is the exact same um, orientation or comportment, right? That's really needed for us to appreciate anything at all, right?
Yes.
I have a lone daffodil that's came up here in February, which is weird. I mean, it's a little early and it might, but there it is. And, busy lives, you just go by things, you don't even see them, right? And so I take that bench and that oak tree to also just be more about that comportment, right? Do I take a moment to look at the sunset, to look at my neighbor,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And it looks as if Heidegger, in his critique of technology, is also critiquing how everything is in a way reduced to one-time use. Even
right.
if even if we like exhaust something by returning to it multiple, I mean, for example, if there's a river, we won't be able to exhaust it or completely exploit it at once, but still, the
Hmm.
idea is its exploitability
Right.
at once, right? So um, his entire critique of technology does um, focus on how things are transformed into objects, and
Hmm.
objects are transformed into stockpile,
Right.
which one simply uses and throws away.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so even
Optimize it, use it, or toss
move
it
on,
aside.
yes,
Right.
and move on, which is also an interesting sort of phrase in the English
Right.
language. Might not
Hmm.
be really accidental. The reason it is so all
Right.
pervasive.
I'm
That
sure it's a big part of Gestell in itself,
yes,
obviously capitalism, consumerism.
yes,
Um, I think about how people use it a lot in reference to, anybody that might have a grievance or be upset about something, right? Loss of a relationship or job, a pet. You really need to just move on.
yes.
Really, I think the
which is
opposite might be true. Maybe, yeah.
which is what interestingly Claudius tells Hamlet in the very beginning of Hamlet that yes, you are grieving, which is good, but to persist in obstinate condolement is not. we also need to move on. And so,
Mm-hmm.
do it in due measure and let's get to, and what he is really saying there is that if Hamlet grieves too much, there's the fear of him figuring things out because there's so
Mm-hmm.
much for him to hide, Claudius. So he doesn't want Hamlet to dwell because
Mm.
if he dwells, he might figure, and it is precisely Hamlet's dwelling on this and not letting it go, which is also, I think, symbolized by the ghost of his father, that he actually does ultimately figure out what happened to him and understands how the mechanics of statecraft works and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah,
Right.
so the moving on has this imperative of not finding out, not figuring out.
Exactly.
No. So
Not being able to tarry, right?
yes,
Not being able to
yes,
go beneath the surface, all which are relevant to, our world and the
yes.
disturbing paradigm that we are in. Um, Another thing that came to mind is we'll wrap up quick pretty soon, but so in this discussion that we've been having, I know you saw it, uh, and correct me if I'm wrong. So there was a video circulating on Facebook that includes, I apologize, I don't know the one woman's name, but there's an interviewer, there's a woman who's representing analytic philosophy,
Yes.
and then there's Babbage representing continental philosophy. So you do know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So I was thinking about how that video and what that video is about is relevant here. And, I have by no means do I disparage or discount the value of analytic philosophy in any way, shape, or form. I love logic. I teach logic critical thinking. I'm, versed in various analytic philosophers. And it definitely has its place and its purpose, etc. But I think it's interesting to think about that division, right?
Uh-huh.
Analytic continental with the things we're talking about here,
Mhm.
because um, analytic is far more well suited to being taught by
Mm.
an AI bot, first of all, right?
Mm.
And not always, but often its content is about that boring, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's, you
Which is
know,
what she
it,
says.
right, which is, yeah, Babette's point, which I think the other woman totally misunderstood Babette's point. I think she got defensive and she reacted. She didn't really take a moment to
And
tarry
yes,
and respond,
and
right?
I thought that the word boring, in the way that Babette uses it, is more than emotional boredom. So at one level, we have
All right.
boredom as an emotion, but at
Mm-hmm.
another level, boredom also means repetition in the sense that what you're doing is not in a way uh,
Life
rebelling
affirming,
life of yes,
meaningful,
yes,
world expanding, world augmenting. Exactly. That's how I took her to
world
mean boring,
augmenting especially.
is that
Yes.
it was boring in that sense, that it's like, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, we did marry the color scientists, and there's important lessons there, no doubt. Okay. Um, but I'll just be frank. My experience of analytic philosophy largely is that is undergraduate philosophy. And yes, now you're talking about Bayesianism or something, then that is venturing off into, legitimate graduate level stuff. And it's important and it has a place. And I'm glad there's people that like it and people that do it. But I mean, just my personally and as an instructor for 26 years of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students, what they find valuable and meaningful and engaging is the ancient Greek and the continental stuff, the stuff
And
that has direct connection to your lived daily lives,
mm,
right?
yes,
Um,
and
so I don't know.
and
I felt like
often,
that was
yeah, and no, 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 it's important, and often analytic thinking, and this is actually something that's explicitly stated in these texts is that the main idea seems to be um,
The
propriety.
opponent's role.
Opponent's role, yes, indeed, that too, but the main thing seems to be the propriety of speaking properly, or um,
Sure,
clarity of
yes.
expression. This is also at the popular level seen as the main distinction between analytic and continental traditions.
Hmm.
That the analytic tradition is clearer and the continental tradition is unclear.
No surprise that it's Anglo-analytic then,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because I
Be-
mean,
a big,
that tradition loves its rules, its
yes,
protocol, its
yes,
decorum. Um, you know,
yeah.
so
And the unclarity of continental thinking. I mean, there is unclarity because there is a world augmentation
right,
being done. I mean, obviously, if you're shifting things in the world, yeah, that the definition of unclear means not habitual, not repetitive, not commonized, if you will. So if you're engaged in a world augmenting exercise, yeah, we have to be radical and even recalcitrant in our use of language, using
right,
language against its purposes, using language in new ways,
right,
trying to speak
right,
differently. All that will come up as muddled speech, but that's not a
right,
criticism in my opinion.
right.
So
Well, and it just occurred to me, based even on what, okay, I think the lady, she emphasized rigor and clarity.
yeah,
And obviously that has its place, and obviously that's important. Okay, but it's occurring to me, I'm thinking specifically about texts I read uh, in graduate school that are analytic philosophy about language and things. Saul Kripke, I'm thinking of some other ones. Um, but if rigor and clarity are my priority, it seems to me that necessarily entails there will be no unthought
right,
in my thinking.
right.
I mean,
Yes,
doesn't it?
yes,
Because I'm thinking about, really taking a text and breaking it down into logical form, even, using a symbolic logic system, right? Which can be helpful. You and I have done it in talking about
yes,
things. We're trying to think through arguments and stuff. But in the end, at the end of the day, if what I present to you is, you know, chiefly concerned with rigor and clarity, there won't be any unthought in it. And
yes,
therefore, it cannot be great thinking in Heidegger's
right,
sense,
right.
right?
And also, it's also interesting because continental philosophy is often criticized by analytic philosophy. So they
Yes.
are the sort of the analytic side is often the sort of much more arrogant, I sometimes think, in
An
relation to
arbiter of judges. I mean,
yes,
that's why Babette said, well, who's judging? I
yes,
took her to be making an implied statement that
that
it's
you
the
are being a
analytics
judge. Yeah,
that are always judging,
yes,
right? Why that has no clarity. Why would I read Levinas, right? And
right, right.
it's
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah,
so, I mean, in that sense, again, I think of that distinction between epistemology and metaphysics. They're kind of go together here a little bit. Epistemology, what we can know, why we can know it, very defined, rigorous, clear, very important. Okay, certainly important, the basis of science, scientific methodology. But at the same time, if we don't acknowledge that the boundaries imply a beyond
yes.
and then seek the truth that is in the beyond, how is what we're doing of any real value
And how
beyond
can
sort of a circle jerk kind of
yes,
thing?
circle jerk.
Like
And
what do they call it? It's just an intellectual masturbation,
right.
right? It's
And
I
it
don't
would
know.
be so difficult to put it into political practice, social reconstruction practice. I mean, those are some of the interesting things too that that continental
Right,
tradition could help us with. So, yeah, so these are
right.
all sort of discussions that go together with
Hmm.
regard to what is happening to our world today in terms of the technologization of language also, which is a huge
Right.
concern for Heidegger. the logistics that logic becoming logistics. This is kind of how he
Right.
sometimes puts it. And I like that term because that way of speaking because he's trying to move us beyond logic as logistics to logic in its roots in logos.
Right.
So language and how we treat language is, I think, if being is a huge subject for at least the later Heidegger, the second huge subject is language, and uh,
Right.
and we don't have any other communal access to being other than language, obviously. So I mean, communal access. I mean, we can have
Right.
private access to
Right.
being, but when it comes to the communal access, it's language. And so, how we treat language um, is also an important subject, and it is relevant to what is happening with AI, and it is also relevant to that debate that you referenced with Babbitt and the analytic professor. Um, yeah, it boils down to I think that how language itself is seen and how we comport with language. So,
Right.
yeah,
And yeah, and so the last thing that's coming to me, I will say about the analytic. Again, I don't mean to for any viewers.
sure.
I totally appreciate its place. There's certainly stuff I've enjoyed reading and so
And
forth,
I
but
think also that there is some concessions also from the analytic side in the sense that I think I don't know this much, but I've been told that um, there are good works now. So it doesn't quite represent the traditional or the major predominant analytic tradition, but there are some works which are trying to at least mimic the continental approach to things. So yeah, so
right,
there are concessions being made, which only proves to me that kind of Babette is right in her in her
right.
response
And
because
and I would say that Gestell, the
yeah,
operation of Gestell and Enframing, analytic is calculative thinking.
yes,
Full stop.
yes.
That's what it is. It is inherently and totally calculative thinking.
Mhm.
Meditative thinking goes beyond the
Right,
limits of
right,
analytic thought.
right.
Right.
What you were saying that you had because before I interrupted you, you were saying you had a a thought about this. So it was this the point about
That was it,
calculated
though,
thinking.
the
Okay,
way those
okay.
analytic can be
Yeah.
seen as Heidegger's calculative thinking. It can be put to use. It has rigor and clarity. It's like a machine. And I mean,
Did you happen to do you listen to do you follow this English the British reporter who works now for Zeteo? His name is Owen Jones. Do you know Owen
I don't
Jones?
know. I'm not sure. I'm not
So
sure.
he did an interview with he's an interesting um, journalist. So he did an interview with an important biographer of Chomsky.
Hmm.
So, and this he did after the Epstein files were released, and we came to know about the deeper, more long-lasting ties between Epstein and Chomsky and Chomsky's wife, Valeria. So, this professor, I forget his name, but he wrote a book on Chomsky when Chomsky was uh, now Chomsky is like not writing, not speaking, but this was like a few years ago when he was much more active. And Chomsky like dismissed the book, but the book is like now getting far more attention than it did then,
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
where the writer says that the whole idea of and just another context for listeners, um, Chomsky is very anti-continental. He hates people like Zizek and so on. So Zizek and Chomsky had a huge sort of disagreement, and Zizek thinks that sorry, Chomsky thinks that people like Zizek Lacan, and these people, they are not really even intellectuals. They're doing.
Huh.
He called it intellectual fraud and so on.
Wow.
So
Mhm.
yeah, now I'm thinking if I make an extension of this, it would include people like Butler and so on. He wouldn't give any of these
Right.
prominent continental thinkers any time of his day. So yeah, so this biographer says that actually Chomsky was working at MIT and he was building a computer. Owen asks him, actually, I know so much about Chomsky's politics. I really don't know anything about his linguistics. Can you like
Right.
give us an introduction to his sort of linguistic theory? And he says the introduction requires only one sentence. And he says, your brain or your mind, let's say, is a computer. That's it.
So,
That's all.
no,
And your
no.
language skills are uh, like there are pre-existing programming centers in your brain which generate language and language structures.
Wow.
That's it. Now he says this model of mind and language was being prepared at MIT so that it
Hmm.
could be usable for American defense activities, and especially automatic, I don't understand the terms, but automatic missile systems, automatic. So, because at that time, uh, computer language was being developed, and they wanted to understand how to teach the rocket to listen to understand our commands. So that was the
Mm.
main goal, so that I can give a command to a rocket and the rocket knows what to do. So in order to do this, I have to first understand what language is, so that I can give a linguistic command. So it was then necessary to have um, a theory of language or a linguistics which looked at language as nothing but this sort of command response
Mhm.
system. And it is
Right.
in this context that the Chomskyan linguistics was sort of made or
Mhm.
theorized. So,
Right.
yeah, all this to say, indeed, calculative thinking. Um,
Right.
so,
And the
Chomsky,
idea that
yeah.
language and all that it can mean is reducible to something like propositional logic, right?
Propositional logic, which then can be usable for a command response kind of
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
technology.
Wow. That's disappointing. I mean, I've never like been one to read a lot of Chomsky. I've read a little here and there. I don't claim to know a lot about him. But what I have been learning more recently has been disappointing.
And
I'll say that.
that biographer says that actually, if you pay attention to Chomsky's um, corpus, you do find that he's really deficient when it comes to gender. So it's
Huh.
always it's nothing new according to him. Like he always like he was nominally obviously in support of the women's movement and so on, but there's really nothing that like a
Hmm.
feminist theory could learn from his
Right.
works, except in a secondary way. Like for example, he will speak about U.S. hegemony, and then
Right.
obviously that can be important in formulating feminist discourse. But other than that, there's a lack of gender awareness, according to him, in
Wow.
Chomsky's world. So yeah,
Well,
rigor.
maybe we should wrap it up with the disappointment of Chomsky.
Yes, absolutely.
End our recording. Um, thanks so much, and like and subscribe. And yeah, so we'll
Yes.
be doing something else soon. Uh, yeah, thanks.
More provocative stuff to follow.
Oh, absolutely. Great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.